Look at the bright side, Dad. At 60, you can finally stop pretending you're important to that company. Let's face it, you're obsolete. My son, Brandon, laughed, swirling the expensive wine in his glass. My daughter, Alyssa, giggled into her napkin. We were sitting in the dining room of the suburban house I had spent 25 years paying off. My termination letter from Apex Engineering lay right next to my dinner plate, the bold black ink staring back at me. I was 60 years old. I looked at my wife, Linda, expecting a comforting glance. Instead, she kept her eyes fixed on her steak, completely silent. "It's not funny, Brandon," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I gave 30 years to that firm. I built their primary data infrastructure. They laid me off with 2 weeks severance." "Well, Richard," Linda finally spoke, her voice chillingly practical. "Brandon is right. You didn't adapt, and honestly, your salary was the only thing keeping up with the lifestyle we built here. Brandon needs his law school tuition paid next month, and Alyssa's wedding deposit is due. What are we supposed to do now?" Before I could answer, my phone vibrated against the hardwood table. It was a notification from our shared bank account. I glanced down. Transaction alert. $45,000 withdrawn from checking account. Remaining balance, $1,102.40. My chest tightened. I looked up at Linda, my heart hammering wildly. If you want to hear more raw emotional life confessions from people who survived the deepest betrayals, please take 5 seconds to subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep sharing these true stories. "Linda?" I stammered, holding up the screen. "What is this? Where did our emergency savings go?" Linda calmly wiped her mouth with her napkin. "I transferred it to Alyssa's bridal vendor this afternoon, Richard, before you told us the bad news. We can't cancel the venue. What would our friends think?" "You spent our entire emergency cushion on a single party when I just lost my job?" My voice finally cracked. "Don't yell at Mom, Brandon," snapped Brandon, standing up. "You're the one who failed to keep his position. If you can't provide for this family anymore, don't blame us for trying to survive." They all stood up from the table, leaving me alone with the dirty dishes and my termination letter. The silence in the room was suffocating. I reached out and touched the gold wedding ring on my finger. It suddenly felt incredibly heavy. I walked upstairs to our master bedroom, intending to confront Linda in private, but when I turned the handle, the door wouldn't budge. It was locked from the inside. "Linda, open the door," I knocked gently. "Go sleep in the guest room, Richard." Her muffled voice came through the thick wood. "I need time to think. I can't look at you right now. The financial stress is giving me a migraine." I stood in the dimly lit hallway staring at the brass doorknob. 30 years of marriage, and I was locked out because my utility to the family had expired. I slept on the narrow mattress in the guest room. The next morning, the house was completely empty. No note on the counter, no coffee brewed. My car keys were missing from the hook by the front door. I checked my phone app again. Linda had changed the password to our joint brokerage account. I was completely locked out of our retirement portfolio. I walked down to the basement, seeking comfort in my old workbench. Tucked away behind a stack of dusty blueprints, I saw a faded leather journal. It belonged to my late older brother, Thomas, who had passed away 5 years ago. He had been an eccentric software developer, always living in a small apartment, completely isolated. I opened the journal to the last entry. "Richard, they only love the shadow of your wallet. When the light goes out, the shadow disappears. If you ever find yourself in the dark, open the safe deposit box at First National. The code is the date we built our first radio." Suddenly, the landline phone on my workbench rang. I picked it up, my hand shaking. "Richard? It's David Vance from Corporate Legal at Apex Engineering. I need you to come into the downtown office immediately. We found a major anomaly in the server migration you finalized yesterday." "An anomaly?" I asked. "David, I don't work there anymore. You terminated my contract." "If you don't come in willingly, Richard, our next call is to the authorities," David said coldly. "We're looking at a massive data breach, and your credentials were used to download the proprietary source code of our entire framework." My breath hitched. I hadn't downloaded anything. I had spent my final day simply packing my desk and clearing my personal browser history. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I whispered. When I arrived at the Apex corporate tower, I wasn't led to the HR department. I was taken straight to a glass-walled conference room on the top floor. Sitting across from David Vance was my son, Brandon. He was wearing his best suit, looking incredibly smug next to a senior partner of the firm. "Brandon?" I gasped. "What are you doing here?" "I'm acting as a legal consultant for Apex, Dad," Brandon said, leaning forward on his elbows. "Since I'm a top student at the university, Professor Vance asked me to review the digital audit trail. It looks incredibly bad for you." "Richard," David Vance said, turning a laptop screen toward me. "An internal IP address mapped directly to your home network downloaded 3 gigabytes of encrypted blueprints at 11:30 p.m. last night, right after you were let go. This is a federal offense." I stared at the timestamp on the screen. 11:30 p.m. I had been lying awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. "I didn't do this," I said, looking my son directly in the eyes. "Brandon, you know I was home. I was in the guest room all night." Brandon didn't blink. "Dad, anyone can set up a remote access Trojan from their phone. The logs don't lie. But Apex is willing to be generous. If you sign over the deed to your suburban house to settle the intellectual property damages quietly, they won't file criminal charges." The puzzle pieces suddenly crashed together in my mind. The locked bedroom door, my missing car keys, Linda changing the banking passwords. The sudden rush to secure Alyssa's wedding venue. They weren't just reacting to my job loss. They had planned a total asset liquidation, and my own son was framing me to force my hand. "You cooked the logs," I whispered, my voice trembling with a mixture of horror and profound sorrow. "Brandon, you did this." "Watch your mouth, Richard," Vance warned. "You have 48 hours to execute the property transfer, or the FBI gets the drive." I stood up from the chair. My legs felt like lead. I didn't look at Brandon. I walked out of the room, the heavy glass door clicking shut behind me. I didn't go home. I couldn't bear to look at Linda or pretend that we were a family. Instead, I took a taxi to the downtown branch of First National Bank. My mind kept spinning back to my brother's journal. The code to the safe deposit box was the date we built our first shortwave radio, July 12, 1978, 071278. The vault manager led me into a small, private viewing booth and placed a long metallic box on the table. My fingers shook as I entered the code. The lock clicked open. Inside lay a single, pristine white envelope and an encrypted hardware security key, a YubiKey. I opened the envelope. Thomas's sharp, neat handwriting filled the paper. "Richard, if you were reading this, the parasites have finally drained you. I knew Linda and her arrogant children would turn on you the moment the corporate income stopped. I never told you, but the data infrastructure you built for Apex was based on my original protocols. I sued them for patent infringement silently 10 years ago. We settled out of court. I put the entire settlement into a private offshore trust under your name. There is $2.4 million on that hardware key, but more importantly, I kept a permanent independent mirror log of the Apex main servers. If they ever try to frame you for data theft, the master key on this thumb drive will prove who actually accessed the network." Tears blurred my vision. My eccentric, quiet brother had spent the last years of his life building a fortress to protect me from my own family. I took the hardware key and plugged it into my phone using an adapter. A secure banking interface loaded. Account verified. Richard Jenkins Corporate Trust. Available balance, $2,415,809.12. Right below the balance was a real-time network log file labeled Apex Mirror Sync. I clicked the file from last night at 11:30 p.m. The source IP address wasn't my home network. The MAC address mapped directly to a laptop registered to Brandon Jenkins, authenticated using a remote VPN token that had been stolen from my desk diary 3 weeks ago. My phone suddenly buzzed in my hand. It was a text from Linda. "The movers are at the house, Richard. We're packing up your things from the guest room. Brandon told me about the legal situation. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Sign the house over tomorrow or we'll tell the whole neighborhood what you did." I sat in the quiet bank booth for a long time looking at the screen. For 30 years, I had been a shield. I had tolerated the arrogance, the demands, and the constant pressure to earn more, believing that love meant enduring anything to keep the peace. But as I stared at the evidence of my son's betrayal, a cold, unyielding wall built itself inside my chest. The sacrifice was over. I called an old colleague of mine, a brilliant cybersecurity attorney named Sarah Higgins. "Sarah," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion, "I have a federal corporate fraud case, an identity theft case, and a massive extortion scheme, and I have certified unalterable server mirrors to prove every single bit of it." "Bring it to my office right now, Richard," she said, her tone instantly hardening. "Don't say another word on an unsecured line." The next morning, the deadline arrived. I drove to my suburban home in a rental car. The driveway was packed with a large moving truck. Boxes labeled Alyssa's wedding and Brandon's library were lined up on the manicured lawn. Linda, Brandon, and Alyssa were standing on the front porch, accompanied by David Vance, who was holding the property transfer paperwork. "Ah, the failure arrives," Brandon said, stepping down from the porch. "Did you bring the signed deed, Dad, or should Mr. Vance call his contacts at the bureau?" "I brought something much better, Brandon," I said, walking up the driveway. I pulled out a manila folder from my briefcase. Linda sneered at me. "Richard, stop playing games. You ruined our lives by losing that job. Just sign the house over so we can salvage Alyssa's wedding and Brandon's career. We're leaving you anyway. The divorce papers are being filed on Monday." "Good," I said calmly. I handed the manila folder to David Vance. "You should read that before you let my son sign anything else for your firm, David." David Vance frowned, opening the folder. His eyes scanned the first page, the certified server mirror logs from my brother's trust. As he turned to the second page, which contained Brandon's laptop registration and the stolen VPN token routing data, the color completely drained from his face. "What is this?" Vance whispered, his hand shaking. "That is the absolute proof that Brandon committed corporate espionage using my stolen credentials," I said, looking directly at my son. "He bypassed your security protocols to frame me, entirely orchestrated to extort this house from me. And since your company's signature is on the original patent settlement with my brother Thomas, you know exactly how legitimate those mirror logs are." Brandon lunged forward, trying to grab the folder. "He's lying! He fabricated those files." "They are cryptographic mirrors, Brandon," I said coldly. "You're a first-year law student. You should know that you can't fake a blockchain-verified server timestamp. The FBI Financial Crimes Division received the original data bundle at 9 a.m. this morning." Alyssa dropped her bridal planner onto the concrete driveway. "Brandon, what did you do? What about my wedding money?" "Your wedding money is gone, Alyssa," I said, turning to her. "Your mother took every cent of our shared savings to pay for a party we couldn't afford, while helping your brother frame me. The bank accounts are frozen as part of the asset investigation." Linda stepped toward me, her eyes wide with terror. "Richard, please, we're your family. We can talk about this. We can fix this." "We aren't a family, Linda," I said, pulling the gold wedding ring off my finger and dropping it onto the porch steps. "You were just business partners who decided to liquidate the founder when the quarterly profits dropped. The house stays in my name. The movers can unpack everything." 2 dark sedan vehicles pulled up to the curb behind my rental car. 4 federal agents stepped out, their badges glinting in the morning sun. They walked past me straight toward Brandon. Brandon didn't even try to run. He stood frozen as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. He looked at me, his face twisted in a mixture of rage, tears, and sudden pathetic desperation. "Dad, please, you can't do this. My life is over." "You brought this on yourself, son," I said softly, the words exactly echoing what he had said to me at the dinner table just 48 hours prior. Linda fell to her knees on the porch, sobbing uncontrollably into her hands. Alyssa was frantically screaming into her phone, trying to call her fiancé, completely unaware that his family would call off the wedding by the end of the week due to the public scandal. David Vance quietly packed his papers into his briefcase and walked back to his car without saying a single word to anyone. His career at Apex Engineering was effectively finished for allowing an extortion scheme to take place under his watch. 6 months later, I sat on the porch of a beautiful, modest cottage overlooking the Oregon coastline. The suburban house had been sold and the proceeds were quietly invested. I used a fraction of my brother Thomas's legacy to establish a non-profit training center for older workers who had been displaced by corporate automation, a place where nobody would ever be called obsolete. Linda tried to contest the divorce, demanding half of the trust fund, but my attorney, Sarah, presented the extortion evidence to the family court judge. Linda received nothing but her clothes and a mountain of legal debt from Brandon's defense fees. Brandon is currently serving a 3-year sentence in a minimum security federal facility. Yesterday, I received a letter from Alyssa. It was filled with apologies, asking if we could meet for coffee and if I could help her with her mounting rent payments. I read the letter twice, looking out at the vast, peaceful blue of the ocean. I didn't burn the letter, but I didn't reply either. I finally found my peace, not by getting even, but by walking away entirely. The light that my family loved had gone out for them, but for the first time in my 60 years, I was finally standing in a light of my own making.